Okay, good evening, everyone. And if you have not signed up for the 5 essential elements of a great story, then you may be in the wrong spot. But I'm glad you stopped in to go through this with me, and hopefully you are excited about learning about how to do a great story. You can have a good story, you can have a great story. So hopefully yours is a great story. Now, throughout, as we go through this, I'm going to be suggesting, I'm not sure if I admit or if Sam does. Okay, maybe I can. But I'm going to be suggesting different books that would fit themes and plot and things like that. If you think of something that you've read recently that would fit in what I'm talking about, then feel free to just unmute yourself and let me know. All right, so here we go. Okay, first of all, let's examine why people read books. Why do you read books? Why do people read books? So I gave 4 different examples here. Entertainment, you know, Irma Bombeck. Sharon, you probably know Irma Bombeck. Maybe
oh, yes.
The younger ones may not, but the grass is always greener over the septic tank. She wrote to not only entertain, but if you remember, Irma Bombeck also had some great life lessons in all of her stories. Stephen King, if you were on with Susan last week, she mentioned Stephen King's book on writing. This is a memoir that actually the goal is to educate you on writing. It's Stephen King's whole story on how he fought the writing urge and then how he went through every stage of it. So it's memoir and a lot of great advice on writing. Your Pain is Not a Waste is one to educate and clarity on an issue. I just helped Delia Grace here to write this and publish it. It's a story of a young Middle Eastern girl. She's 32 years old and had an incurable cancer that she fought for 3 years. And so it is a Christian book, but it is dynamite when it comes to this topic of going through pain and wondering and asking God, why? Why? One of those questions we ask him a lot. The Summer House by James Michener is, again, for entertainment or for escape. Some people like to escape their regular life, you know, the mundane life. And so they escape into a certain genre. Maybe it's mystery, maybe it's espionage, whatever. So there's 4 good reasons why people read books. So keep it in mind, because when you think about your writing, even though you think you're writing for yourself, ultimately you're not. You're writing for the reader. So if you don't have readers who are interested in what you're writing about, then it's a book for yourself. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. All right, so here are the 5 essential elements. You might want to take notes, but I do want you to kind of, when we get on here, to kind of give me some ideas too. But theme is the overlying main idea of a book or of a story. Your characters that will give flavor to your story, as well as your setting. Setting and character are 2 of the most important things in writing a book. Point of view, who's telling the story, and then the overlying plot of your story. So those are the 5 essential elements. We're going to pick up on each one of those as we go. If you have a question anytime along, you can ask it either in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself, you just ask me, okay? Okay, so first of all, there are 7 major literary conflicts. Now, this is not theme, it's conflicts that you'll find in our different genres that we pick up. Man versus nature, man versus man, man versus society, man versus self, man versus fate, the gods, man versus the unknown, technology, machine. What's that? There's the phone ringing. If you'll put your phones on silent. Okay, so can you think of something? I know I can't go back on this, but can you think of anything about man versus fate or the gods? What book do you think of for there? I can't, if somebody is talking.
I need to find a way to mute myself. I'm not sure how to do
Go
it.
to the bottom of your screen, Sharon, and there's a little, oh, you're muted. You're muted now. Hi, Dawn. Glad you could stop in. Okay, so man versus technology, machinery. We've got a lot of books out there now that are in the AI genre. Okay, so those are conflicts, not themes, but conflicts. So in all of those conflicts, there are themes. All right, examples of themes. Here we go. So one is love. Love lost, love gained. I am so sorry, but I have to excuse myself because my husband is on the phone now and I can hear, can you hear him talking? Okay, then I'll go on. But if that's a problem, then I'll tell him to shut his door. Love, Pride and Prejudice, Romeo and Juliet, Love Lost, the fate of love, you know, the stars or whatever, that's Romeo and Juliet. Death, The Book Thief, The Lovely Bones. Good versus Evil, Lord of the Rings, Chronicles of Narnia. If you think of any ones as we go along, let me know. Coming of Age, Little Women, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is a great book. And as I suggest books and different things, if you know the genre that you're writing in, and I have some examples here, I would suggest you go read those books and to give you an idea of the conflict that's in there. A book has to have lots of conflict, not just one big conflict, but several conflicts to make a reader keep turning that next page. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is about a little girl, it's a memoir, a little girl who grows up in Brooklyn. It's a pretty hefty book, but it is an enjoyable read about her life in the, I think it's like the 30s, 40s. Power and corruption is a huge theme right now. Macbeth, Animal Farm. For what's going on in the world today, Animal Farm is a great study in character. Hunger Games. I never read Hunger Games, but maybe you did, and you can relate that power and corruption. For any of these five, can you think of another one? For love, death, good versus evil, coming of age, or power and corruption? Can you think of anything else?
For good versus evil, Harry Potter.
Yes, yes, very good. Yes, definitely good versus evil. What else? Is there anything else you can think of? Something you've read recently? Okay, we'll go on because that's 5 of the themes. Here's survival, A Lord of the Flies, Life of Pi. I didn't read the book, but I saw the movie where the tiger and the boy is on the raft and for so long. I think it was a tiger. Yeah. Then courage and heroism, The Hobbit, Robin Hood. Some of this, the courage and heroism is archetypes, is what we call. They're going on a quest for something, especially in The Hobbit. Prejudice, To Kill a Mockingbird. Also, the sequel to that is To Set a Watchman, is the other one that Harper Lee wrote. Okay, so we'll be talking about To Kill a Mockingbird and point of view later, but Scout writes first person To Kill a Mockingbird. A little girl writes it's in a little girl's language. And then her sequel is when Scout returns to the town and confronts her father about his racism. And Frankenstein, Prejudice, when that monster was first built, he was built to be kind. But then because of the prejudice in the town and the way he looked, people thought of him as a monster right away. So those two are about prejudice. Warning of danger to come. 1984 was a futuristic book at the time. I don't know, Dawn, Sharon, you guys would remember this, from, I think I probably read it in my high school days in the 60s, but I know I did. I read it in the 60s, but it was a very futuristic book about how things were going to be different in 1984. Fahrenheit 41, that was futuristic too, and how all the books, or the firemen burn all the books. So that's their job, to burn books rather than to save homes or anything like that. War, A Farewell to Arms is an old book, as well as Tolstoy's War and Peace. Any other ideas or suggestions there for any one of those themes? And throughout, be thinking about what your theme is of your book, and even a memoir. I know, Dawn, you were working on a memoir. I've got 3 memoirs out myself, but there's always some kind of underlying theme, even in a memoir. So just be thinking about that as you're writing your book. A theme is something you want your reader to take away with them. Have you ever read a book where you think about it for weeks to come? I do that with movies a lot. I've done it with books. One was, what was that one? Oh, The One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That movie stayed with me for way too long. So I don't know if you have any books or movies that you just kind of grab you and you keep thinking about this, or maybe you think about what if. That's the kind of book you want to write. Okay, after themes, characters. Now, Susan touched on this last week, if you were with Susan. Let's see, we got. Okay, so with characters, as Susan said last week, it's important to write out each one. And even if you're doing a memoir, write your characters out all together. Mine was, about life on the farm when I was very young. That was my first memoir. So if I had known, that was my first book, if I'd known then what I know now, it would have been a lot easier to write. But I should have written down all of Daddy's characteristics, what he loved about, his favorite holiday, his favorite color, his favorite whatever, his physical personality traits. He's 5'2" and happy and loving. And then you have to consider, in your characters, you need an antagonist as well as a protagonist. Protagonist is a good guy, the one you want the reader to say, yeah, go, go, go. The antagonist is the one that is against the protagonist. Antagonist does not have to be a person, though. It could be nature. It could be a storm. That could be an antagonist. A dramatic foil is that little guy that sits on your shoulder and says, oh, you won't get in trouble for doing that. Or maybe saying, ooh, don't do that. So let's see, we've got 2 people in the waiting room, but I think Sam will take care of them. Oh, I'll admit them. So your story needs a protagonist, antagonist, a dramatic foil. That dramatic foil, if any of you remember in your high school days studying Romeo and Juliet, the dramatic foil was Tybalt. Tybalt was the one that was saying, he was always wanting to fight, and he was always trying to get Romeo to fight. So a dramatic foil helps that character, helps to build that protagonist and build their character, because even though that guy's sitting on your shoulder saying, oh, you're not going to get in trouble, then ultimately it's up to that protagonist to make the right decision. Okay, so then you have round characters and flat characters. A round character shows all different types of personalities. They can be happy, they can be sad, they can cry for joy and cry for sadness. They can be angry, they can be encouraging for others. But then a flat character has one personality all the way through. You only see one side of his character. You'll see that in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Let me think. What else would, I'm trying to think of another character. Can you think of another story that would have a character that would have just, you only see one side? James Thurber's books, Life with Father. I think that may have flat character in it. Then there's static and dynamic. Static is where a person believes one thing at the very beginning and never changes his thought process. He may be an atheist at the very beginning of the book, and you cannot change his mind all the way through. So he's an atheist at the end. Whereas dynamic, they change. They'll change. They can be maybe moody at the beginning, constantly moody or withdrawn. And at the end of the book, they're the life of the party, or they've been drawn out of that introvert personality. Is someone asking a question, or they're just not muted?
I apologize, I'm not muted. 1 second.
Okay. Well, feel free to unmute yourself whenever you want to have a question. Then the thought processes. What kind of thought process does your character have? If it's, and we're getting into point of view, but if it's third person limited point of view, and you only know that person, one person's thought process, that's where the thought process come out. Okay, so emotions. What does your character like, or what makes them tick, more or less? What is going to what yanks their chain, more or less, and makes them angry? What are their likes? What are their dislikes? Even right down to their favorite color. So you can build these characters before you even start writing your book, so that you know your characters inside out. Again, I mentioned at the very beginning here that even if you're writing a memoir, especially if you're writing a memoir, you know your characters, but your reader doesn't. So how do you introduce and how do you lay out everything about your character without writing down? Okay, so Daddy was 5'2". He was balding at the age of 30. He was happy-go-lucky, and he was a little chubby. You don't put that all in one sentence. That has to come out gradually as he does different things. You know, as he reaches to the top shelf for something. So your characters, you need to know them backwards and forwards. So you can expose. Uh-oh, I think I'm echoing now. Right? All right, Sam is behind the curtain somehow, and maybe Sam, you can do something about that. Oh, it ended. Okay, here we go.
That happens when someone else's audio is on. I think that's what happened.
Okay, thank you, Sam. All right, just as important as characters are, the setting can sometimes become a character just by itself, the setting. The setting, the location has to match the theme. If you can think of Little Red Riding Hood in New York City, it wouldn't work. You think of Gone with the Wind in modern day Washington State, or I don't know, whatever. It wouldn't fit. The time period has so much to do with it too. And the time period helps your reader to set their mind in the right time. Is it Civil War? Is it World War II? Is it a time of unrest in the 60s? Is it a time of the pandemic? You know, what is happening with the time period? And what also helps your reader is to figure out that time period is to slip in different things of that, like when I wrote my memoir that took place in the 50s and 60s, I could slip in things about movies that were showing at the time. I went to the Arcadia, or I went to the drive-in theater and saw Gone with the Wind, or I went to, and you have to be really careful that you do your research. Make sure if you're talking about eating a Baby Ruth, make sure that Baby Ruth was out by then. Make sure M&Ms have been created if you're going to be eating M&Ms, okay? If you're explaining like a prom dress in the 50s and 60s, would be so much different than the prom dresses of today. So time period. Significant sites. Will they be seeing an Amish cart in their in the story? Will they be seeing the ocean? Think also, and I don't have the 5 senses anywhere in my PowerPoint, but continually be thinking about your 5 senses. What do you want the reader to see in their brain? What do you want them to hear? They have to hear something. It could be ducks landing on the lake, or landing on the pond in the front yard. The ducks are coming north, for the summer, or they've just landed on a lake like on Medina Lake, and for the winter. And so you need to make sure that they are seeing, they're hearing, maybe tasting, definitely smelling. You remember going into HEB during the fall and you get that first whiff of those cinnamon brooms? And when you smell those cinnamon brooms, it always brings back memories of Mom's apple pie or her pumpkin pie. The sense of smell brings so many memories coming back. So, and then feel. What do you feel? Do you feel a cool wisp going across your skin, or do you feel the intense heat of the battle, the flames of battle? Or are you walking through the woods and it's a stifling hot day? Okay, so be thinking. I didn't put the senses down, but they're very important. So surrounding nature, the weather. Oh my goodness, there are books written about floods, about hurricanes, tornadoes. The weather may have a huge part in the setting of your book and setting the tone and the atmosphere. Local customs, again, Amish country. Maybe you're in Amish country. When you think about adding flavor and atmosphere to your book, consider political unrest, parents battling over children, or young love. All of this will add to that setting. What is really going on? And it's important to get to that setting right in the first couple pages. Again, it has to be interwoven more or less with your story. Buildings, sites, cars. Again, with research, if he's driving a Model T or a Model A, you better make sure that they're back in the 20s. Yes.
Shelley wants to know, how do you do research for a setting?
Oh my goodness, you know what? Google is your best friend. Okay, so there are lots of sites out there. If you say dress or dresses of the 1920s. When I researched, I could not remember the hat that Daddy always wore. And so I had to do hats of the 1930s and found it was a fedora. I had to look at pictures and find it was a felt fedora that he wore at the time. So yeah, you can do all types of historical research. Oh, now my phone is ringing. Historical research, if you just let your fingers do the walking through Google. What's another thing? So if you think candy, yeah, I had to research the candy and make sure. I knew there were sugar daddies. I didn't know if there were. I remember the sugar daddy on the long stick, but I didn't remember the baby sugar daddies. And that was one thing I had to research to see if baby sugar daddies were back then. And they weren't at the time I was growing up. So research candy, research prices. I had to research prices. What I did for because I took a walk through our town of 3,000 people. And I envisioned my father first coming to our little town and looking at the prices. He was a chef, looking at the prices of meat, looking at the price and comparing the prices. He had come from New York City. So I had to see, okay, what would the prices of roast beef be in Acme grocery store in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, as opposed to the city, New York City. And so I went to our local newspapers, went to the library, Green Free Library. It's a library in Wellsboro, and they have an archive of newspapers going back to the early 1800s. So I was able to call up the right time period that he would have been going into that town, 1940, January 1940, and found all types of advertisements for the groceries, for dresses, for the movie theater, you know, what movies were showing. So good question. And yeah, lots of places to research on just in the search bar of Google. Okay, point of view. I love the point of view. Now, if you want to be real creative, there are people who have taken stories, if they're over 75 years old, then they are public for public use. So you can take a story like Little Red Riding Hood and twist it a little bit. They're kind of called, I think they're called fractured fairy tales. So when you're thinking point of view, Little Red Riding Hood, what if it wasn't about her being a good little girl? What if it was more told in the point of view of the wolf? So this one is really, Red Riding Hood was rotten. So that's a different point of view. Rapunzel, told in Rapunzel's viewpoint, but here it's told in, what's her name? Dame somebody. Was that her stepmother? I don't remember. No, I don't know who had her up there. But it was told in her point of view. Really, Rapunzel needed a haircut. So it's a different point of view. So first person, the wolf he's telling from his first person point of view, as well as the one who cut Rapunzel's hair. It's in her point of view. Can you think of another book that's in first person point of view? Where first person is where a character in the book is telling the story. I don't know if I've forgotten what I've done here. Yep, okay, we'll get into that. Third person, Dawn?
Forrest Gump?
Yeah.
Forrest Gump?
Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah. I was thinking Hemingway wrote like that a lot.
The Old Man in the Sea?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Then there's third person omniscient. Third person omniscient is a person outside of the story who knows what everybody is thinking, what every character is thinking. Third person limited is a person outside of the story who lets the reader know what one person is thinking. Only one person. So that's the different points of view. There's also a second point of view, second person point of view. And it's not used very much because it gets very tiresome. It's where they use you. You do this, you do that, you do this. Used a lot with how-to books, mostly how-to books. So once you decide your point of view, then you have to say, okay, if you're going to use first person, which character will tell it? The antagonist, the protagonist? Maybe your dramatic foil will tell you where the antagonist and the protagonist were both wrong. So you have to determine who's going to tell your story because it makes a big difference. Okay, let me get so let's look at some of these. First person, To Kill a Mockingbird. Little Scout, I think she was 8 years old. She told all about the whole thing, that she didn't understand a lot of stuff that was going on. Here's second person, you. If you give a mouse a cookie, that's second person using you. Third person limit, I don't know if any of you have, I taught The Secret Life of Walter Mitty when I taught 10th grade English. I loved it. I loved it. It was a great character study on him. Secret Life of Walter Mitty, he was pretty much, I forget what he did for a job. Wasn't very important, but in his dreams, he was the world-renowned doctor, or he was a world-renowned pilot in World War II, or he made up all these different fantasies in his mind. So you definitely knew exactly what he was thinking, what he was dreaming, and midway, either his wife would say, you know, get your overshoes. I told you to get your overshoes. Why don't you have your overshoes on? So, and then, or another time, the garage man would say, what are you doing? Back up there. What are you doing? You know, you idiot, you know. And so all these people would yell at him. And he's in the middle of these wonderful fantasies where he's just really something in the world. But that's definitely your third person limited. Have any of you read Where the Crawdads Sing yet? Oh, that's awesome. I just read it a couple months ago. It's third person omniscient, a person outside who's telling what everyone thinks. This is fairly new within the last couple years, I would say, or this last year, I guess. Maybe it came out last summer, I don't remember. But it's about a young girl who is abandoned by her whole family. And I think she lives like in the northern Outer Banks, North Carolina area, like out in the swampy area. And she pretty much brings herself up. She lives in a little shack out in the swampy area, and she grows up by herself, becomes very self-sufficient, but it is an awesome book on character study, on fortuitousness, the strength. But anyway, you might, get that, and because it's a really good read, that one. Any other ideas about point of view or any questions here? And if you haven't read that sequel to Kill a Mockingbird, the To Set a Watchman, there was a lot of debate when that came out as to whether Harper Lee really wrote it, because Harper Lee was, I think she recently died. I don't remember. She was in her 80s or something. But I think she did. I like to think she did. Her name is on it. But especially in the times that we're in now, with racism being thrown around a lot, it's really a good story because it's a story of don't judge another person unless you've walked in their shoes. And so she goes home and, rags on her dad because she thought he was so racist, but yet it was the times we lived in. So anyway, it's a great book. These are two good ones to consider. Okay, plot. This is our last one, I think. Are you a plotter or are you a pantser? Well, your plot is the story. What is going to make that reader turn the page or stay up late at night because they can't put the book down? Have you ever had a book like that? You just can't put it down? Yeah, that's a sign.
Many times.
What?
Many times.
Many times, yes. That's a sign of a good writer. Sorry, my voice. Excuse me. All right. So if you are a plotter, you will plot every step of the way before you even start writing. If you're a pantser, you'll write by the seat of your pants. You'll just get going, and maybe you don't even know where you're going to end, but you have an idea for a book, and so you just start writing. And you eventually get to a point where, oh, how am I going to end this? Or, oh, I didn't know my character was going to do that. And your character takes on a form or design or decisions that you really hadn't thought about because you didn't plot it out. So if you're a plotter, you would have all of these elements. I knew a writer, two different writers, okay, that used, in one seminar, there were two people who offered how they did the plotting. If you remember, Sharon, Dawn, if you remember those, the computer paper that was all connected together, you know, with perforation and all. Well, they had boxes of those left over from an office they had years ago. So what this one writer did is she tacked it up all around her room. So it was all around her office, and she would plot chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. So, and then another person though used old wallpaper that she had never used, and she used the back side of that, and she used felt markers and did the same thing with her chapters. I have never gotten to that point where I've done that, but it's great idea. I did plot out my memoir in that I knew I did my memoir based on life lessons. So I knew which life lesson I wanted in. I had like 28 life lessons and a story with each one. But in novels, there has to be some kind of a consequence. You have a story goal, you know where it's going. What are the consequences that your character will have to face up to for his actions? What requirements are needed? What things are needed to be set in place so that the action can move forward? If you have language, if you have words in there, sentences in there that do not move your story forward, then they're useless. Then they shouldn't be in there. Everything you write needs to move your story forward. You don't want to bog your reader down with a whole lot of description. If you're trying to describe the inner workings of a corporate building, corporate business, it has to come out in emotion. It has to be people living through it. You can't do what they call as an information dump. You can't just dump all that information on a reader and expect them to hurry and turn the next page, that it's exciting. What about forewarnings? If you remember Romeo and Juliet or Julius Caesar, there were forewarnings there. There are times I don't know if you, I love to watch these British mysteries on TV. And so watching these British mysteries, I always tell my husband, he did it or she did it, right? Like when in the 5-10 minutes, in the first 5 or 10 minutes, I say, I know who did it, I know who did it, but yet I can't write a mystery. I love it. But there are all these forewarnings along the way, foreshadowings that lead up to you deciding who did it. But yeah, why can't I write it? I'm so good at criticizing it, but I can't write it. Okay. But the forewarnings help your story to keep going. And then the cost. What is it going to cost the protagonist for his actions? Will he have to have a jail sentence? Will he lose the love of his life to someone else? What is the cost? On the other hand, what's the dividend? What will he earn for living out his life the way he does? And then concrete, I've got to move this, concrete events. What are the concrete events that happen? What are special events that move the story along? Maybe a story of, maybe you're building somebody's character and you take them through a certain event. Okay, here's on a small scale. I'm talking about maybe a 10-year-old boy in HEB, and I want to show all along the way how honest he is. And so I talk about him going to HEB and he finds a $100 bill on the floor at HEB, and he takes it to the manager. And, you know, and that tells you, without you saying, Johnny was an honest boy. That's boring. So you have to go through the whole story of him maybe thinking he should just pocket it, or should he turn it in? Put him in that dilemma, in that it has to be some kind of dilemma he's in so that he can work himself out of it, whether it's for the good or the bad, okay? Here's a plot diagram. So the action, it looks like stair steps here, but the action has to bring about the climax, the anticlimax, or the denouement. Okay, so climax, so here you introduce your characters in your setting. And then all the way, it's like stair steps. It's rising action that encourages your reader to keep reading. And then this happens, and then this happens. And then he decides to do this, and that caused a problem. And then you get way up here to the most exciting, oh my goodness, he really did that. Oh my goodness. And then the rest of that is your falling action that takes you down to the resolution, or denouement, kind of the same thing, or an anticlimax. An anticlimax is what O. Henry always wrote. O. Henry he wrote these wonderful stories, and you thought you knew the ending until the ending. And it was totally different. Totally, and you said, what? What? That really happened? It's an anticlimax is sometimes a disappointment for the reader. My daughter and I just drove back from Arizona the last 2 days. We took 2 days, and we listened to the series Limetown. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it was a TV series for the first season, and then they just did podcasts. And then at the end, we got to the end of the second season. That was the end of it altogether. And I said to my daughter, what happened? What happened? And she said, I don't know. And so then I started Googling on my phone summaries. I had to look for summaries for this to see, okay, what happened? And in the summaries of Limetown, it said it was such a disappointment because nobody knows what happened. Nobody there were too many characters. You just ended up with so many questions. You don't want that, because if you are really interested in writing a book, there may be a sequel to that book. And you want that reader to keep reading, to come back and say, oh, I want another Sharon Pinkston book, or I want another Don Brockmeyer book. They're so good. Yeah, I mean, you've heard, there are different authors that you will go back to over and over and over. I like Brandolyn Collins. She writes awesome mysteries, does a lot of research on her mysteries. And so I'll go get a Brandolyn Collins mystery if I want to curl up with a good book. All right. So now, with your theme, character, setting, point of view, and plot, with all of that in mind, and your and keeping in mind you want to use your 5 senses, you use that narrative arc to make your reader laugh, you make them cry, you make them angry, you make them frustrated, and you give them an enjoyable read. Remember at the beginning I said even though writing may be enjoyable for you and you really have a story you want to tell, your writing is not for you. It's for your reader. If it's not for your reader, if you're not writing for your reader, then they might not get halfway through your book, if that far. I did talk about Where the Crawdads Sing, but also A Man Called Ove. I laughed in this. Dawn, did you read this one? Okay, I thought you did. But I laughed so hard in this one. I cried tears of sadness. I was angry at some people. I was frustrated. I met all of these. This Frederick Bachman, I've never read another book of his, but I want to. But he made me do all of that. It was a page turner. It's just about a grumpy old man. And I think it's in Sweden. And Tom Hanks is supposed to be coming out with a movie. Made called Ove. But it's really, really good, that one. It's a great one on character study. I gave it to my 99-year-old mom to read because she was such a good reader. And she couldn't get through the first chapter. She says, he's just a grumpy old man. I don't want to read about grumpy old men. but he was quite a character. Where the Crawdads Sing, that's a good character study too. And it's another one where I laughed, I cried. I was frustrated at the townspeople. I was angry at them for different things, different reasons. So create that emotional journey. Give your readers something to really love about you, and they will remember your name, okay? So remember, it's all about the reader. Any questions about it being about the reader? Okay. So my final slide is a quote. The best place to start is with the first word, and don't stop until you write the end. As I tell I have a legacy writing group that Dawn is part of, and then we're part of Hill Country Christian Writers every Tuesday night at the library when we're allowed to be at the library. And that's a critique group for writers. So you are all welcome to come join us. But the main thing that I tell people is get your Bic, right, Dawn?
Yep.
Get your Bic, get your butt in the chair and just do it. And don't stop until you write the end. And find yourself. I know the first little webinar that Susan did a couple weeks ago was about finding time to write. So find that perfect time. Maybe it's before the kids get up in the morning. Maybe it's after they go to bed at night. When is that perfect time? And if you don't have more than an hour to write, maybe you don't have more than a half hour to write every day, but just write. There was let's see, who is that? Oh my goodness. I read this. I was a detective. He had a huge detective series, and he was a, what do you call it, dispatch in a police station. And he wrote while he was on dispatch. He would be listening, and passing phone calls through and all. And there were downtimes. And he started writing his mysteries there. And he became very prolific. And I can't remember his name. He was at, went to Franklin, Tennessee and went to a mystery conference. Thought he was going to write a mystery. He had written over 700 books. Yeah, 700 books. And he just writes all the time. And he said he got all of his ideas from the days he did dispatch. So, and you do too. The stories you want to write are stories from your life. You've picked up here, you've picked up there, little tidbits. Okay, we are at the end. So if there are any questions, I will take them now. Just unmute yourself and I'll see if I can answer your questions.
I have a question.
Okay,
Can you hear
Sharon.
me?
Uh-huh.
I was curious about how you wrote 3 different memoirs. How did you focus them differently?
Yeah, a memoir is just a snippet of your life, whereas the autobiography is from the time you were born to present time. So you can write many different memoirs. My first memoir, and I intended on just writing one and I'd be done, but I wrote it on my upbringing on the farm, like from birth to, well, I started with mom and daddy, and daddy came from a Jewish orphanage in New York City, and mom was a farm girl, and I started with their life, and then the settling in a broken down farm, 100-acre farm, and how we lived the innocent type of life that I wish all kids could live now. Mm-hmm. Then my second memoir, it was actually a very short book about my son's hitchhiking from, it was from San Antonio. It's how to hitchhike from San Antonio to California in 3 days and 14 easy steps. So it was a very simple little thing. It was a snippet of time. It was over one weekend. That's how long it took, one weekend. But I was able to do a comical little book on that. And then my third one was based on my mom. It's called Panning for Gold in Your Golden Years. And the subtitle is A Journal for Positive Aging. So I have little chapters, individual chapters, and at the end of each chapter, it has lines where you can write your experience, like loss of hearing, loss of your car keys. You can't drive a car anymore, or that you've given up your car keys, you've given up driving. Different mobility, like now you have a walker, you have a wheelchair, and how every stage of aging for mom, she saw it as a positive thing. She felt at 80, she thought she was dangerous to other people on the road. So, it was kind of nice to become the backseat driver all the time. So she could always see the good in every step. Those were my three. So you have teenage years, you have your married life, you have bringing up kids, you have adult children. There are so many different memoirs that you can write.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good question. Anything else, Celeste?
Yeah, who's your favorite author or a series of books that you prefer reading? Like for recreational, entertainment.
Yeah. I'm all over the place.
Mhm.
I love memoirs. I think one of my favorite memoirs was a girl called Zippy. That was the name of the book, and it was just a small town girl growing up in Indiana. I love that one. Oh my goodness. I'm getting old, so I can't think. I did love the Crawdads book. I like going back to old books like Ben Carson's story I read again recently. The Gone with the Wind, things like that. So if you go back, and I think now that, I've been writing really seriously since 2013, and I think when I read books, I look at them differently than I did the first time.
And that was my next question. So how often, what's the average number of times you might go back and read the same book?
Oh, I don't. Probably twice is the most, and there are only those few that I would do that with. Yeah, I move on. Yeah, so. And I do a lot of editing for authors, and I think that's a lot of my reading. I have edited some really good books lately. Susan Dolan has one that's going to come out real soon. She's part of our Hill Country Christian Writers, and I had a chance to really delve into her book. And it's a young girl, probably in her 20s, who helps her mom clean out grandma's storage unit. And she finds this whole stack of journals that grandma has written. And so she starts reading them, and she starts kind of envisioning the kind of life that grandma had. It's really good. So it's called Ella, just Ella, by Susan Dolan. So be on the lookout for that. That's good. So what else? Any other questions? It is 6:57. We have 3 minutes if there are any other questions. Remember, we have Hill Country Christian Writers whenever the library opens again. You are very welcome. Authors bring their work there. They bring up to 2,500 words. We critique it in a very nice way, but there are different groups, writing groups that you can join. There's that warm, fuzzy group that's more like our legacy group. And then there's that not harsh critique, but good, solid critique for you, where other authors can give you advice. So that's Tuesday nights at 6 o'clock. I'm going to be contacting the writers in there in the next, probably this weekend, to see if we can do a Zoom. So if you're interested, just give me a holler. Judy Watters, I'm on Facebook. You can go to Judy Sheer, S-H-E-E-R, Judy Sheer Watters, Watters with 2 T's, my author page. and just contact me through private message or whatever. And there's also, oh, no, go to Hill Country Christian Writers Facebook page. That's the better place. And just say, hey, I want to be a member, join there, and you'll get little tidbits and know when we're going to be meeting again. Anything else?
Will there be a copy of this replay?
Yes, there is. It will be, let me think. Sam, I think it's under, where do they go for this? I know you can get the replay.
So the library has a YouTube channel, and so it will be on there.
Okay. So they just go to YouTube and then they put in the search bar Bulverde or Mammon Bulverde Library.
Yeah, it should be Mammon Family Public Library.
Okay.
And I believe Bethany also sends out a link to everyone who registered after the class.
Okay, good. Anything else?
Just back to when you're doing research for a setting, and maybe you've grown up in a city, but you haven't lived there in a long time. Certainly you can do Google, but is there anything else that you would kind of think of or refer to?
Well, public library. You could always go to the public library and research there. They have a section in the library, if I remember, that reading room. If you go walk, like when you go in the front door and you go to the far right and then you turn to the left, and they have that beautiful reading room back there. Right before you get to the reading room, there's historical and genealogy section on the left right before you go into that. Is that right, Sam?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of research articles you can find there. I think old newspapers are really good. Oh, I'm sure we have an archival, or you can go to any city public library and call up their archival of the newspaper. Some libraries, I would think, like Boston Library, New York City Library, may have a charge to that. I know our Green Free Library in Podunk, USA, little town, they don't have a charge. But you can find a lot of things in newspapers.